Hello, welcome to my presentation of our first week's activity on big data for the Cast Store Company. A little bit about Cast Store. It's run by Kathy. She's had this business for 20 plus years. She specializes in ornamental figurines. So as you can imagine, there are hundreds of molds that she has to purchase or create to then be able to make the casts of the different figurines. Again, that can be an inventory, in hundreds, as well as where are those molds stored? Are they in drawers? Are they on shelves? They all have shelf lives. Some of the molds, after you use them several times, the details aren't as clear, things like that. So the mold inventory in and of itself is a little, not separate, but is part of her setup for creating the molds and making sales. The molds are different characters. You could think of things like trees and owls and bunny rabbits. Some of them are seasonal, Easter centric, other holiday type centric, figurines. And when the molds are cast, then she ends up with hundreds of those as well that can be in stock at any given time. So she sells them either finished or painted, and she also sells them as blanks. She has a direct website that she promotes from and has her inventory on for sales. And she also has an Etsy presence where people can go and find her items and then go over to her website to make that purchase. Kathy also, I worked with her a couple years ago, and her idea, her long-term goal is to retire and pass this business on officially to her adult children. So as you can imagine, so many things are stored, so many, there's a lot of information about her company, her sales, her clients, and things through her point of sale systems that just kind of naturally get housed in there throughout the business processes. But there's a lot of things that she has written down, for instance, the mold inventory and how she handles all of those, as well as her own, just natural processes that just has not been captured and any place digitally for analyzing, historical activities, much less being able to predict, some of those future business needs or sales or activities or actions. So I talked to her at that time. It's interesting because I'm a lover of data, and I can see, throughout all of my years of working with data, how to scale some of not only her existing uses, but, being able to have an analysis of, what's happened in the past and how that can affect the future. So, when I talked to her a lot about um, getting all that data, together, uh, not just the stuff that we have on these websites and the stuff that we have in her point of sale system, but also the nuances of, you know, how long the molds take to cast. I mean, different molds take different times. How long do particular molds last? Some of them last longer than others because of the lack of detail or the, ornate detail of them. So those types of things were definitely, talked about, but maybe not necessarily in practice already. And these are some of the common challenges in big data. And, not just discovering all the data. Do we even have enough data? The variety of that data. Can the data scale? Not just for, to show the historical stuff, but can we use it for future, for current uses, which is great, but what might we want to use that for in the future? And the quality and relevance, So the process and management challenges are also something that is a big challenge. And I would say that, that's certainly something that is just intrinsic to her particular situation because she's been doing this on her own for so long. So her own process and the management of her current process, while it works for her, trying to replicate that for other employees for the future of her business. And, not only capturing and figuring out all of those things that she just sort of does by nature, but also capturing all of the other metadata points that she keeps in her mind, and you know storing it and structuring it in such a way that not only captures everything currently correctly, but also is able to apply to future uses and needs, and can scale. So those are definitely a couple of challenges I find with her situation. The amount of data is there, the variety of the data is there, the quality of the data is there, so all of those things, they just need to be, we need to just make sure they're converted into a system that is dynamic and scalable. My personal experience, I've got 15 plus years as a mobile web developer. I've built lots of backend server services, NoSQL databases, SQL databases, and certainly, pulling all this data together as a front end presentation of some sort, whether it's in a browser, across web, or across different devices, or just presented in reports, or dashboards, things of that nature. And, there's a lot of best practices in big data, but these are some of my, favorites, especially when it comes to the metadata management, identifying all of those tiny little pieces of data that may not be very obvious to the client that are important. And sometimes they're not obvious to me, obviously. Lots of research in that beginning stage is very important. And convincing the client that it's necessary, and convincing sometimes my teammates if I'm working on a team, or management. I mean, at times I've worked with managers that don't find this sort of research and deep metadata development, and, data structure development, information architecting, they don't see the benefits of those things. So sometimes it's convincing. And then the quality of data, is it clean? Has it been scrubbed? Is it consistent? Building systems that will prevent errors in that type of data so that it remains useful and queries don't fail because things are missing or misspelled or out of place. And then governing that, making and committing to a process of the entry and the capturing and the maintenance and the use over time. So these are some of those best practices that really interest me. And enforcing the data governance and integrity, again, the upfront education of the stakeholder and their commitment to this. To these processes, gathering all of the content together, and the resources, if they're on paper, putting them into something that's usable and dynamic, determining the naming conventions for these data components and committing to those first, right, before you even try to build anything. And consistent process that's going to be followed. So, whether they're getting new molds, or they're finishing, the castings that are made from the molds for sales, and even the customer interactions. So some of the dimensional modeling that's presented in the book, these are some items that I thought would fall under each of these levels. So for the business process, taking the customer orders, shipping those orders, casting the blanks, buying the figurine molds themselves, managing the website, managing the Etsy presence, all of those are part of the process. And then here are some things for the grains, metadata that pertains to the inventory itself, the customers themselves, as well as the business itself. And some of those seem very typical, but when we have them all, then we can use them together in combination for, historical purposes, seeing where we've been, as well as setting ourselves up to be able to make these future predictions. Even including, of course, the server data, right, from the website, the Etsy site. So these are some of those pieces that would go along with each of those. And for the data dimensions, how often are the figurines purchased? How many are purchased at a time? Maybe it's for a school and they all, buy the same owl and it's all blank. There's 50 pieces that are shipped to them, and so the students can paint them. And when are these things being purchased? Is it, does she get a bubble at the end of the year? Does she get a bubble during the springtime for certain pieces? Is finished versus non-finished? Is there a certain time of year that those things happen, or just in general, which one might sell better? The categories themselves, and of course, the figurines can be in multiple categories. Shipping locations are important just for predicting accurate shipping costs, maybe future shipping costs, especially if it's not just domestic purchases, if she's got international purchases. And of course, the direct site versus the Etsy conversions. Those are important to know. Is Etsy worth having and paying for? Or is the direct website working just fine on its own? Or should she even branch into other, storefronts? And the promotion versus the retail pricing as well. Does she have sales and things like that? And the facts that we'll gather from these things, there are some items that were very obvious to her, and some things that she already knows, but other things about, the sales quantities per location or per category, the overall shipping costs for those different items, because some of the figurines are bigger than the others. Are those typically being shipped further, or are they more local? And all that does factor into the overall pricing and the costs of the units themselves, as well as what her net profits are, in the end. So I'm pretty interested in getting back with this client in a few months to sort of educate her on some of the things that she could possibly be integrating along with her current system. She talked about trying to possibly have a larger inventory space. So that could, knowing some of these things would help her make those decisions. Maybe she needs it, maybe she doesn't, as well as how many, people to hire or keep on staff, just to keep her costs manageable. So I've really enjoyed this particular presentation and research against this client that I've worked with previously. So please, hope you enjoyed it, and let me know if you have any questions at all. Thank you so much.